They are complaining about how weed is legal and porn is accessible and people gamble a lot and this is sin and just the whole country is Las Vegas. And I just like, and it also says that this is bad behavior. And look, it says the bottom line, reining in Sin Nation could be one of the rare issues that unites the left and the right. These asshole centrists, man. Like, and of course, like I smoke weed all the time on the stream, but like the other stuff too, I end up getting in a bunch of arguments with people over because I'm like very pro porn, pro sex work, and I don't give a shit about gambling. Like it's not something that I think should be that big of an issue because people have the right to do dumb shit that is harmful to them. That's why I very much believe that we shouldn't be throwing people in jail for heroin either. And with the whole puritanical attitude towards sex, I think we live in a very sexually repressed society. And a lot of people don't believe me on that and will argue with me on that. And they will usually say it's all over the place in the media. It's everywhere in the advertisements. And it's, yeah, that's because we are a sexually repressed society. So it sells because people are wired to want what they can't have. And that's a very easy way to get people's attention by flashing something that they are not supposed to see. Of course, people can have toxic relationships with these things. They can have toxic relationships with all sorts of things. And a lot of this is probably, you know what, since you're talking about the KYC thing, a lot of this moral panic is being pushed in these movements to revoke a lot of these protections for free speech that are on the internet for what people can publish. Section 230, right? That's what it is? Yeah. That's like the law that makes it possible to host like social media websites where people can post anything and say anything almost. Yeah, I'm not a big gambler. I don't have a problem with it. I look at it like the same way I look at drugs and drugs that I don't do and drugs that I don't like doing. I still think that they should be legal and not stigmatized. You shouldn't be like, oh, that's a dirty person thing to do or something. But I guess what a lot of people are calling for is regulation of the apps and stuff. And I think that's probably a good thing because a lot of the apps are probably doing shady shit that should be rectified. But I don't know what that regulation would look like because I'm not an expert on gambling. But yeah, I think that a lot of this is pushing for more censorship of the internet ultimately. And you can see it in the title, Scaling Sin, because scaling is a tech term. It's a term used for apps on the internet. But I think we should be very careful as a society of the things that we punish people for, both in actual punishments and in shame. I think that we shame people around so many things. It's crazy that we are still in this time. Even with young people too. Young people are often quite puritanical. The stuff I see on the internet. But I guess if you're like growing up in this Epstein era and see all that shit, that's kind of understandable to have a kind of a reaction like that. You know what I mean? This kind of stuff is an example of the fact that there are still very puritanical forces in our society trying to stop people from having fun at every turn. You got to be responsible and got to be safe and got to be, not hurting people. But that was something I wanted to rant on. Yeah, it's definitely a cultural thing. And I think here in the US, I think that we don't realize how repressed and puritanical this society is. Yeah, it is. And that is another thing, is that even people who aren't religious still have the cultural remnants of the religion of the culture that they were born up in, especially here in the US. They still have remnants of it. And I explored this in my book. I'm not sure if I did in some of the videos that I put out, but even in a lot of the new age stuff that I'm into a lot of, there's a lot of kind of puritanical Western stuff in there too that's been shoved in there, because a lot of the new age teachings, so to speak, it's just traditions taken from other cultures and then repackaged here for a Western audience by Western people. So a lot of stuff gets twisted up in translation. And I think that to some extent extent, that's why you see some overlap between some of those communities and some of the more fascist ones as well. Even though I am a part of that community to some extent, that's why I know what to look for and what I've seen. But yeah, it is. You're very much expected to maintain the same values of the Christian world. That's why there was such even though, of course, Obama was a warmonger and all that, there was a bunch of controversy about people saying that he wasn't a Christian and all this stuff. I don't even know if he was or not. I think, but just the fact that a president might not be was like enough for people to be freaking out about. And everything that we see with a lot of the culture war stuff, it's very driven by that. And in some of the videos that I put out, I've actually discussed how a lot of these fundamentalist groups have funded a lot of these culture war efforts. And it's a lot of billionaires too, to get the heat off of them because they want to be pointing their fingers everywhere else. Yeah, exactly. JFK was a Catholic instead of a Protestant, and they were freaking out about that. That was a big controversy. Yeah, and I have dealt with some cool Christians in the anti-war movement who actually believed in the whole Jesus thing and didn't just use it as an excuse to be pious and hateful and stuff. And that actually did open my eyes to some extent. That I don't want to say fuck y'all, but these Christian nationalists are nuts. Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't know about the specific links of Ancient Aliens being a psyop, but it does make sense. And I have a video that I've been working on for a really long time because it's a little bit of a longer video about just the crossover between hippie culture and fascism and things that kind of aligned with what happened in Nazi Germany, and a lot of the same parallels with the hippie movement and some of the things that they adopted, and also the kind of wellness community as they call themselves. Yeah, Satanism has there's a lot of different conceptualizations of Satanism. There's LaVeyan Satanism, which is based on the teachings of Anton LaVey, who was this carny and coroner photographer turned philosopher who wrote all these books that were basically hedonism, and they didn't actually believe in Satan. It was atheism, hedonism, and they just used the word Satanism to express their objection to Christianity. And they saw it as a metaphorical sense. But then I think there are the crazy Satanists who actually believe in Satan, and they are basically Christian Satanists because they believe in the story of Christianity and the way that Satan is described in the Bible and everything like that. Yeah, there are more occult branches of Satanism, and I think that they verge between ones that are more rooted in Christian theology and then another one that is more like Aleister Crowley style occultism. When Christians talk about Satanism, they just mean anything bad or evil. They don't actually understand that most people who identify as Satanists who exist in the US are just normal people who grew up in abusive Christian households, most of them, and they want to express their displeasure with Christianity, and they're atheists, so they identify as Satanists. And like most of the people who are like into heavy metal that identify as Satanists and stuff, most of them are LaVeyan Satanists that are essentially atheists. So I have a very nuanced feeling on that, and that's why when everybody with the whole Epstein thing, everybody was trying to coax me into talking about Satanism and relating to that, and I'm like, I really don't. It's weird. Like it plays into certain narratives, I think, and it's very much a Christian op to call everything Satanism, I think, and it's like a Christian nationalist op to call everything Satanism. But not to say it doesn't exist, and there are things like 764, which are that group of young kids that are doing school shootings and bombings and all sorts of messed up stuff on the internet, and they describe themselves as like satanic Nazis. But that, again, I think is just like using the most rebellious terms that you possibly can, and also these people are children for the most part. So yeah, I agree with that occult power is a tool and not necessarily an evil force, because I definitely still believe in that. I have tarot decks all over the place, crystals all over this house, all sorts of shit. We did all sorts of rituals when I had cancer, and I celebrate the equinoxes and the solstices more than I do the other holidays. But I'm also like like most things, I've gotten to a place where I've explored many of these things that I've been interested in, and I've found that there is value to take from all of it, but you can't really let an ideology consume you. Take the value that you can from it, but I don't know if that was articulated properly, but hopefully the point got across. Don't forget to check out my other videos. And if you have the ability and want to contribute, take a look at my Patreon, where you can get a subscription to my books and other cool stuff. I have some other videos to watch right here. So if you haven't seen them, go and binge on them. I'll see you next time.